Her ragged breaths filled the silence. Edward Lancaster's voice cut through it, low and sharp, slicing into her shame. "What?" he said, each word deliberate. "Do you think you're doing?" Hannah Brooks couldn't lift her head. Her throat locked, words tangled with sobs. Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling into the dented metal bowl at her knees. Her hands trembled against the cold tile, still gripping the rim as though it might steady her. Her voice broke out in a hoarse whisper. "I wasn't stealing, sir. I swear. I was just—" Her chest heaved. "I was starving." Edward's brow furrowed as he stepped closer, the sharp scent of his cologne cutting into the bitterness of the moment. His disbelief carried more weight than anger. "Starving?" he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "You work in a house with 3 kitchens and pantries overflowing. Don't insult me with lies." Hannah's tears came harder. Her words tumbled out between gasps. "I send everything home. My brother's medicine. My sister's school. There's nothing left for me. And Mr. Blake. He said no meals until the floors shined." Her voice cracked, pleading. "It's been 2 days, sir. 2 days." The name landed heavy. Edward's eyes narrowed. And then a shadow filled the doorway. Arthur Blake appeared, posture rigid, lips pressed thin. He had heard every word. "Sir," Arthur said smoothly, bowing his head just enough to mimic respect, "this girl is lying. Always making excuses. If she's starving, it's her own doing. I run this staff with discipline, exactly as you've always instructed." Hannah flinched. Her voice rose, desperate but steady. "Please, sir, I'm not lying. Ask anyone. He withholds food whenever he wants. I couldn't take it anymore." Edward's eyes snapped to Arthur. "Is that true?" Arthur's nostrils flared. His answer came quick, practiced. "Of course not. She's dramatic, like the others. Soft. If you feed them every time they whine, you'll have a house full of beggars, not workers. Discipline keeps order." Hannah lifted her head at last, her face streaked with tears, her eyes fierce despite the trembling in her body. "I don't want pity. I don't want favors. I only want to keep sending money home. That's all I've ever wanted." The room tightened around the words. Even Edward, cold as stone for most of his life, felt something shift. He had admired Arthur's discipline for years. But now, looking at Hannah, reduced to her knees over a dog's bowl, he saw what that discipline truly meant. He had been blind, and he hated the taste of it. "Get up," Edward ordered. Hannah scrambled to her feet, wiping her sleeve across her tear-streaked face. Edward's gaze turned to Arthur. "You withheld food." Arthur's chin lifted. "I enforced order. That's what you've always asked of me. You starve my staff like animals." "They are staff, sir," Arthur said flatly. "They exist to serve." The words, spoken with such ease, struck Edward like a blade. His gaze shifted back to Hannah, the hollow cheeks, the way she hugged her arms around her stomach, shaking. For the first time in decades, the arrogance in him cracked. He stepped closer to Arthur. His voice came out colder than steel. "Pack your things." Arthur blinked. "Sir, you're finished. 30 years or not, you will leave this house tonight. I won't have a man under me who thinks starving workers is discipline." Arthur's jaw tightened. Fury flashed in his eyes, but he knew better than to fight. With a rigid bow, he turned and stormed from the kitchen. The silence that followed felt like the mansion itself exhaled. Edward's eyes returned to Hannah. His tone stayed firm, but something in it had changed. "You should have spoken sooner." Her lips trembled. She forced the words out. "Would you have listened?" That struck deeper than he cared to admit. He didn't answer right away. At last, he said, "From now on, you'll have proper meals. And more wages, enough for your family's needs." Hannah's hands covered her mouth, disbelief spilling across her face. A soft gasp escaped her. "Don't thank me," Edward said quickly. "This isn't charity. It's correction. I let Blake rule unchecked. That ends tonight." Her tears fell again, but this time they weren't only despair. They carried relief, release, something lighter. "I'll still work, sir," she whispered. "But I won't forget this." Edward gave a single nod. His face remained stern, but his eyes, just for a fleeting moment, held something human. As he left the kitchen, Hannah looked down at the metal bowl still on the floor. Her cheeks burned with shame, but something deeper sparked inside her. Resolve. She would never fall to her knees for scraps again. That night, word spread through the mansion. Arthur Blake was gone. The rules were changing. And Edward Lancaster, the man who had never cared, had finally opened his eyes. For Hannah, it wasn't salvation, but it was a start. Hannah's story is a reminder that silence can be as cruel as action. Do you believe Edward's promise will last, or will the mansion's walls swallow the truth again? Your voice matters. Leave a comment and join the conversation. Don't move. The voice cracked through the kitchen like thunder. Hannah froze, her hands still hovering over the chipped metal bowl on the floor. The taste of salt and shame was still on her tongue, the scraps sticking in her throat. Her chest heaved as she turned slowly, and there he was, Edward Lancaster, the man whose name towered over the city like the glass empire he owned. His eyes locked on hers, unreadable, sharp, as though the world had gone still just to measure her humiliation. The silence stretched too long, suffocating. Hannah's trembling lips finally parted. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice raw. "I couldn't. I haven't eaten." It was the kind of confession that should never have been necessary in a house that fed banquets to strangers. But in Edward's mansion, hunger had its own rules, rules written not by him, but by the man who now stepped forward from the shadowed hallway. Arthur Blake, the head butler, stiff in posture and cruel in the smile that flickered at the corner of his mouth. "She's lying, sir," Arthur said smoothly, as if he'd rehearsed it. "I've told her time and again, discipline is the only way to teach the servants. She's pretending, trying to make a fool of us all." Edward's jaw tightened. His gaze moved from Arthur's polished shoes to Hannah's knees on the cold tile. A smear of broth clung to her wrist. She couldn't even lift her head now. Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling silently onto the floor. "Please," Hannah said, voice barely more than breath. "I didn't want to, but I haven't had a meal in 3 days. He locks the kitchen after breakfast. I tried to work through it, but—" She broke off, choking on her own words. Arthur stepped closer, his white-gloved hand twitching with irritation. "Pathetic excuses. She's lazy, sir. The others don't complain." Edward's stare lingered on Hannah, but something shifted in his face. For the first time, he noticed the hollowness of her cheeks, the faint tremor in her hands, the way her uniform hung too loose on her frame. She wasn't acting. This wasn't some performance. Hannah's voice cracked again, fragile but steadying with each word. "I grew up hungry, sir. I know what shame tastes like. But this is worse. Because here, there's food. And it's not that I can't reach it. It's that someone makes sure I don't." Arthur's composure slipped, a flash of panic in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. "She dares twist this into an accusation?" he scoffed, but his voice no longer carried the same authority. Edward said nothing for a moment. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock above the stove, marking each heavy second. Finally, he stepped forward. His shoes echoed sharply against the marble as he stopped just inches away from Hannah. "Stand up," he said. Her legs shook as she obeyed, her hands still trembling, her head bowed in shame. Edward looked past her, straight at Arthur. His voice was calm, but the air in the room thickened with the weight of it. "You've been in this house for 30 years, Arthur. Long enough to believe it belonged to you. Long enough to think I wouldn't notice. But I see now. You've starved the people who keep this place alive, and you've done it in my name." Arthur stammered. "Sir, you misunderstand. Get out." The words were cold steel. Arthur's face blanched. You can't mean." "Now." The command was final. Arthur's lips parted as if to protest again, but the force in Edward's gaze silenced him. With a stiff bow that masked the fury beneath his skin, the butler turned and disappeared into the hallway, his footsteps receding like retreating thunder. The kitchen felt different once he was gone. The air lighter, though the weight of shame still clung to Hannah's shoulders. She dared to lift her eyes, meeting Edward's for the first time without flinching. He studied her, and something almost human flickered behind the wealth and power carved into his face. "No one in this house goes hungry again," he said quietly. For the first time since she had walked through the mansion's iron gates, Hannah allowed herself to breathe.